if you think about the distribution of value of some of the closed source large language models, it kind of stops at that centralized company. Is that where the value has been created to create that product? I would argue no, because the value that's been created has been created in the data that's gone in to improve that model. And so there's this kind of really warped flow where the people who've actually contributed to the value creation are not part of the economic transaction at the end of that pipeline. And what we reimagine is a world in which, no, if you're going to use an AI model and you've contributed something valuable to it, whether you're an engineer, you're a marketer, data provider, whatever you are, that value is representatively distributed to all the people who've actually added the value. And that's like the opposite of value extraction. And that's what we really want to encourage at Vana.
Welcome everybody to Dealflow Founders Stories. So the idea behind the series of podcasts is to meet with some of the most innovative and smart founders in the whole entire Web3, tech, AI, innovative space, and really learn about them as people, understand their struggles, their journeys, their wins, their losses, and just get rid of all of the tech and learn about who are the people behind these companies, get some inspiring stories and learn about their journey. So today I'm super stoked to be sitting down here with a co-founder of Vana, a platform that gives people back the opportunity to reclaim their data rights. So data is one of the hottest subjects at the moment, a saying that's going around. I'm sure Art would be very familiar with it, that data is the new oil, and where's all that going? So I'm really excited to jump into the conversation today to learn more about your story, Art, where you think data is going, and learn a little bit more about Vana, because I know that when we met about a month ago, I was able to jump into full data nerd mode, and I've got so many questions that I wanted to ask you today. Like, there's legit so many. So I know I'm not going to get through all of them, but we'll just sort of navigate, duck and dive, and explore the opportunities of data, because it's literally infinite at the moment. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kira. I'm very glad to be here. And yes, I'm a massive data nerd. I think I was into data before it was cool. So I like to say I'm OG in this space, but now that it's cool, I like to think that I'm a little bit cooler than I used to be.
Oh yeah, some nice flex points. Well, we'll go with that. But okay, also something else that you don't know is coming for you. But for this series, I like to ask some 5 questions that you should be able to answer within 5 seconds are icebreakers.
Okay.
And if everybody else can't understand, so Art's his accent is from Australia and I'm from New Zealand, so I've got a little bit of bias in these questions. There's a little bit of beef between New Zealand and Australians. I think it's kind of like Big Brother, Big Sister kind of vibes. I don't know. What do you think?
Kiwis more. I really, really like Kiwi. So no rivalry on my side, but definitely rivalry between our countries. And I will say that people, when they hear us speak, probably think we have a similar accent. And that's probably the thing that I get the most gripe about. I don't feel insulted when someone's like, oh, you got a Kiwi accent. I'm just like, can you not tell that we speak differently? People can't, Kira. People just don't get it.
I know, but I think it's because there's so few of us. I think there's 5 million New Zealanders. I don't know what the population is of Australia, but comparatively to the world, we're a drop in the ocean.
We are. Yeah.
All right.
What are the 5 questions? Hit me.
All right. So this is the first easy one. Describe Vana in 3 emojis.
So it would be the data GIF, like the little virus guy.
Oh yeah.
And then it would be a picture of you as an individual, and then a picture of a lockbox, like a lock. Because the idea is like use your own data is the thing that needs to fuel the future of AI. And right now you can imagine that it's actually data company lock. It should be data to lock, because that's like really important that you're the one who owns your own data.
I love it. That's such a good little caption. All right. Okay. Now let's get into the Aussie and Kiwi questions. So who makes the better barbecue, New Zealand or Australia?
Oh, I'm Filipino by barbecue blood, so I would say kiwis. I love a good hungy. Like, yeah, give me
Oh
give
my
me give me
God.
the kiwi barbecue.
Not many people know what a hangi is, so I'm just going to quickly describe it. So it's a traditional method of cooking in New Zealand. It's very traditional. And what they do is they dig a hole under the ground and they put a lot of hot rocks in it. And then they put like potatoes and meat in under with these hot rocks. They cover it in flax and then cover it in soil. So it's like a underground barbecue. And then they leave it for like 10 hours, come back, unbury it. And it's got a very earthy flavor
Love
to
it.
it, right?
Love it. And the fact that you can just bury it in the dirt is so much fun.
Yeah, yeah, we don't normally cook like that. That's traditional.
You have all these backyards in New Zealand with these piles of dirt. People are gonna think we live like primitives on this side of the world.
They will, they will, they will. But all right, let's keep going.
All right.
Whose country has a more legendary rugby team, the Wallabies or the All Blacks?
Oh, okay. No, I have to say the Wallabies. I'm sorry, and you're gonna hate me for that. Yeah,
That's all right. I do
I have to
forgive
be
you.
I have to be loyal
Of
to
course,
my
of
country's
course.
rugby team.
All
Otherwise,
right,
I
how
will
about
get lynched in my own country.
you will? Yes, I do agree. All right, let's try this one. Vegemite or Marmite?
Oh, Vegemite, 100%. Marmite, wolf. I don't even know. I don't even know.
Um,
I've never tasted it, but it just seems strange to me.
Well, I'll get you a copy and or a sample, and I might be able to flip you. All right, last one.
Yeah.
The pavlova, is this an Australian dessert or a New Zealand
See,
dessert?
I know the history of this. It's actually not Australian, but for me, it's iconically Australian because Christmas time, people think about like, oh, you want a turkey or something heavy. No, you don't because it's stinking hot where I come from in Australia. You want the
Hmm.
lightest, airiest, fluffiest, sweetest dessert with some mangoes and passion fruit. It is your pavlova. So, like, I know that it's not actually Australian by history, but for me, it's iconically Australian.
I think I would say exactly the same and argue back. It's just New Zealand, but I love all of that. And I knew I had to like bring some Aussie Kiwi flavor into these 5 questions. So
I
you've
love
done
it.
a good job. But
I love it.
let's jump more into the details and learn more about you as a founder. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
I know you have a very colorful background and you've jumped around from studying law and practicing in law and then doing social sciences in Harvard, working alongside the Prime Minister of East Timor, and now building the biggest decentralized data platform. Can you just take me back to that journey? I mean, it's entirely different where you're a co-founder in technical data to compared to law. They're like super contrasting, right?
Yeah. So I did start my career as a lawyer, and I will say, in my defense, I think it's similar in New Zealand where you basically have to choose your career path when you're 17 because you go
Yes.
straight into a profession. And I didn't really know what I was doing at 17. All I knew was I was a pretty smart kid. I was really good at music at the time, so it was either going to be I was going to be a musician or I was going to use use my academic credentials to get into the most difficult program, which was law. I've always been that kind of person. And so I did it. And by the time I realized I didn't want to do it, I was more than halfway through my degree. And I'm also not a quitter. So I decided that I was going to go through it, knowing full well that I didn't really want to stay in it long term. I got the opportunity, actually through the law, to work directly with the Prime Minister of East Timor. I was one of the senior advisors in his cabinet, and I would, while I was engaged as a legal advisor in a country like Timor, which is, I think it's still the fourth newest country in the world. There's a lot of state building to do. And it was just
Mm.
fascinating to me that I had the opportunity to build a nation. And that's why I really got into social science because in order to build a nation, you've got to know how the nation's developing. And I built this expertise around how do you assess based on data the way that societies are progressing. I used that to get into Harvard, and then I used that to get into one of the research centers, my expertise in that to like kind of do the same sort of work for now corporates and other governments. And so I did a lot of supply chain work to look at like what are the impacts on communities and company supply chains, and there were always big data problems.
Mm.
And and this was a kind of the time in which like AI was still in its infancy, at least in popular press, and so a lot of the models that I was working with, statistical models, would require a lot of data similar to how AI models are ingesting the data. And so that's, I guess, the crossover to, I became obsessed with human data. I became obsessed
Mm.
with trying to understand, read the tea leaves about humans in society. And that's how I became obsessed with this idea of AI and realizing that the platforms have so much powerful data on how society is progressing. That made me really passionate about this topic of like, how do we actually make that knowledge ours and not just
Mm.
these companies? Just a small segue is, if you think about what are the, like, one of the questions that you get asked as a social scientist in development is like, what are the drivers of poverty?
Mm.
And that's a really interesting question because there are so many different ones. It's a big data question. But Meta probably has a data set that could help answer this problem because
Do
they
you
have
think?
people in poverty's data and their entire
Mm.
life. So like, why are we not using that to cure a problem that exists in our society? That was one of the big reasons why, and still one of the big reasons why I'm passionate about this problem, that we produce so much critical insight every day, and it's going to what? Create me a better newsfeed? Like, come on, we can do better than that as a society.
Yeah, that's a really deep meaning and attaching that to data as well, because you said there's so much data out there. And I feel like even in your everyday life, like I'm, scrolling on the internet, sending a message, or even just like my geographical location, like all of us as data points that are collecting. And I'm not actually that aware of how much data I'm actually pulling into myself. And I think if we look forward in the future, everyone has got a device, everyone is connected. And so everyone, and how does all of this interconnected world operate? It operates on data. Data is the fuel and the to like make all of this interconnected world work. So I think there's a lot of education that is going to be required to for people to understand the value of their own data and then understand how they can utilize that value. So I know that if we want to cast it back a while ago to a time when you were in Colombia and you were looking at collecting human data. And
Yeah.
just to bring it back around to the idea that you said that Facebook, all these big tech giants, they have so much data because we are spending so much time on these platforms. We're giving so much,
Yeah.
but we're not getting anything in return. So cast it back to Colombia. You were there working for a giant coffee company looking to collect human data. What problems did you cover,
Yeah.
and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so the research there was we needed to develop a statistical model that calculated for each dollar that was spent by this coffee company in their supply chain, how much of that generated social impact amongst the communities. And it was
Mm.
actually it wasn't just an ethics question, it was a business question because a lot of coffee companies, luxury coffee companies will do regional sourcing of the bean because it affects the flavor. Like if you
Okay.
guys are Nespresso drinkers, imagine if your favorite Nespresso flavor just changed overnight. It would be catastrophic, right? Like coffee people are obsessed. Like I don't know if Kiwis are Australians. Like you change my coffee,
Mm-hmm.
get out of my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah,
you know.
we're
So
there.
yeah, so like they're really obsessive about like making sure their supply chains are really, really secure. All coffee producers are, if you're doing luxury coffee. So my job was to say, okay, for each dollar that you're spending investing in the supply chain, how secure is it going to be from a social and environmental perspective? So to do that, me and my field team went in to one of the coffee supply chains in Colombia with a survey tool, and we tried to ask a bunch of farmers all these questions about how their lives had changed over the last 5 years. But yeah, if somebody asked me how my life's changed in 5 years, I'd be able to give them no detail. And here I
Mm.
was trying to ask them questions about, can you tell me about how your grocery purchases have changed over the last 5 years? Like, I don't know. And so it was really we really struggled as a team to collect enough data to inform that model. And then I was at a dinner with my host family. So I was living with some of the farmers. And my host mum was like constantly on her phone. And I went up to her and I said, "Hey, like, what are you doing? Like, what could you possibly be doing on your phone obsessively at this time of night?" She's like, "I'm on Facebook." And I said, "This is really strange. Can I see your Facebook?" And she showed it to me.
Mm.
And she had things there like messages to her friends about crop yields and weather and like the clothes that she was purchasing for her daughter and like the holidays that they were going on. And I'm like, holy shit, this is the data set. This is the one that I need. If I
Mm.
could just collect this data, I can see how her life has changed over the last 5 years. I don't need to ask her the question. I just need the data. And so we actually tweaked our methodology to ask if we could look, obviously with permission, at people's Facebooks so that we could gather more data. And it was a much better data set. And that really got me on this kind of train of thought around, hang on, why should that level of knowledge power live with a centralized for-profit tech platform when it could have significant impacts on the lives of those very people who are using the product? Gary, you mentioned there, like, the idea of like there needing to be education around it. Yes, that's definitely one component, but I actually think the economic system is broken because we're taught that our data is just a byproduct of tech usage. And it's really not. Today, these large companies are using this to create the multi-billions in revenue that they're getting from AI models. And that's been their game all along. So it's like an economic, it's actually a structural and an economic problem as well as a understanding problem, where we have been taught and incentivized not to care about our data. And that's kind of what Vana's pushing against.
Yeah, you're actually having to, I guess, forge a new asset class and telling people that data is actually worth something, because it's not something you can't pick it up and put it in your wallet. You don't actually tangibly see it, which makes that sort of connection a little bit murky for people to understand.
Yeah.
But again, like, I know that my single data is like my own unique Facebook, Spotify data. That's not very valuable as a standalone. And so this is sort of a little bit more around Vana. We'll get into the details of Vana soon, but I want to know, like, how, I mean, in your research there in Colombia, you were just asking for permission, but how have you gone about trying to incentivize people to actually give their data? Or is it like, can you exchange it for money? Is that enough? Or do you need something more to get people to actually contribute their data to some sort of research or AI model training?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So after I graduated, I actually worked in social impact consulting for a while, and then I got a job working for one of the world's largest data aggregators, or data brokers, you could call them. Bought and sold a lot of data that went into things that we use every day, things like Google Ads, Google Search, Facebook Feed, ChatGPT. A lot of that's all data driven, and a lot of that data isn't scraped. A lot of that data comes directly from people who either label or provide that data. And the thing that these platforms have that we as individuals struggle is the ability to combine that data together, to aggregate. We call it like data aggregation. So, Kira, you're right. Like, if you were to go out there into the world and say, "Hey, everyone, take a look at my Facebook data. How much will you buy it from me for?" You're kind of in like a market imbalance. Like, you can't really bargain with that one piece of data. So what we need is an ability to combine that data together to match or rival the power that these platforms or these data brokers have. So as a data broker, a lot of my job was to source the data. So I would create these projects which incentivize people through cash and sourcing means to bring their data together. Super inefficient for various reasons. It's a whole nother rabbit hole. But we wanted to create a system at Vana that allowed everyday people to say, "Hey, look, guys, like, here's my Facebook data. Can I combine it with yours and yours and yours and yours so that we have the collective bargaining power as these platforms or as these data brokers so that we can go to the market together as a community and be able to reap the upside of our data value?" So it's really an aggregation problem that the protocol solves, as well as an access and capital problem, which is, again, separate issues. But at its fundamental core, yes, your data on its own, not super valuable, but in a group, massive signal can be used to train AI. And that's where the value kind of resides.
Yeah, so Vanna is allowing, as a data aggregator, collectively between groups of people. So I want you to just explain to everybody else who might be listening exactly what is Vana, if you haven't heard of Vana before.
Yeah.
How does it work? Let's get into the details of that, and then we'll ask some more deeper questions.
Yeah, for sure. So it solves that first problem that I talked about, which is data aggregation, like how to create collective value out of data. You can think of them, we call them data liquidity pools or data DAOs. But you can even just think about them as a data union. Like, you all have the same data. You should be combining it together. Now, the problem with this is if you had a person that was checking your data, the nature of data is such that that person can take that data away, copy it, run off with your data, and take all your value away. It could be very extractive. So Vana prevents that from happening by creating that secure compute environment to validate that data, where not an individual, but a set of decentralized nodes will check whether or not your data is high quality, valuable, etc., and then check your eligibility to join the collective, so that you don't have to rely on human trust for a very sensitive and very important economic transaction. On the other side, we want to allow data to be used as a capital asset. The reason why OpenAI is able to reap a lot of revenue is because their AI is more performant because it has more data, more human data. And so we actually think that data is the difference when it comes to AI models. So, how do we treat it as a capital asset so that it can be used time and time again to improve AI models, and so that the people who own the data can reap consistent revenues? We do think data is a capital asset. How do we do that? Rather than the data leaving the system, the data again stays in that secure compute environment. And if somebody wants to access the data, they run an operation on that data. So the data itself never leaves. The data sits there, it stays encrypted, it stays secure, but you want to train a model? Fine. You run code against the data in the secure compute environment, and the model weights get exported, or the insight gets exported. Whatever you need done gets done on the data set, but you never see the data. And that's a really unique way to think about it, because then that data can be sold time and time again through access. And it also grows in capital as more and more data joins the collective. And those are, I guess, the economic kind of problems that we're trying to solve with the Vana chain.
So you've got these different data unions. Say there's a Twitter data union, a Reddit data union, a Spotify data union, GPS location. You've got all these different data unions, and they're how does somebody start them? So can any person be like, okay, I think that there's an opportunity for example, I was thinking about the automated vacuum cleaners that go around the houses, and I was like, okay, these are obviously collecting a lot of data in people's homes. It's in the field industry of robotics, which is massively exploding, and having that in-home personalized data. I was like, okay, there's an opportunity for a data DAO. Okay, so how would I go about being like taking my idea from like, I think there's an opportunity for this type of data set. How would I go about first of all creating something with Vana, and then actually then going and using this data or selling this data to other AI model companies? How does that work?
Yeah, sure. So on the creation of the data collective side of things, so I encourage folks to go to docs.vana.org to see how there's a quick start guide on how to spin up a data collective. So if you do have an idea for a data set, just go there, and there's like a step-by-step guide on how to do it. Right now, it requires the deployment of certain Solidity contracts on the Vana chain, as well as some kind of token rewards you need to kind of define. But through that, you can join our Discord, and our community and ecosystem team can help you out in terms of like mentoring you through that process. That's the self-serve process. We also run seasonal academy programs. We just finished our last one with a founder intensive that we ran in Abu Dhabi with 4 very cool data DAOs that I can't really talk about right now, but very cool data DAOs. If you want to be part of that and have like more white glove service, apply for the next Vana Academy cohort. We had 22 teams participate in the last cohort, and all of them have really cool data sets, anything from Netflix through to robotics through to credit card data. Like there's some really cool stuff in there, and it's a really good way to find other co-founders as well, which we've kind of been fostering. In terms of how that data is commercialized, so a little known fact about Vana is that we run a data commercialization arm within the Vana Foundation. That data commercialization arm uses the networks that we already have. My co-founder and I come from a traditional like Web2 AI background, so we're able to tap those networks to see and validate the value of data sets. So as part of eligibility into the programs, we will check whether or not the data set can be commercializable. Once that's done, we can continue that sales cycle process. We have a full sales cycle and a sales org that is able to kind of manage that for us. And they connect our data DAOs with the data demand so that we kind of play that almost brokerage function to connect the supply with the demand in the marketplace. So it is really a case of, if you think that that a certain data set is valuable, have a chat to us in the ecosystem team. We can validate that for you, and then we can get you on your way to create a budding data business that could sell millions of dollars worth of data out there.
That's what I was going to follow up on. Like, so if I have this fantastic idea about a data pool, a certain set of data that I should be able to collect, I can come to you guys, brainstorm, strategize with your ecosystem people, launch my data DAO, whether it's a vacuum cleaner,
Yep.
robotic
Yep.
data DAO that I'm doing, and you guys can then validate like the commercial aspects of that, see if it's actually worthwhile pursuing this
Yep.
data out, and then you'd go out and just, I guess it's down to marketing, right? And it's that education of getting in front of the people who own these vacuum cleaners or whatever data that you're looking for, educating them and taking them through the process of how to retrieve their data, how to upload their data into the Vana pool, and then do you guys help also on the other end of like the selling the data, right? That's the other part that Vana helps out with.
Yeah. So we go through a data validation
Mm-hmm.
exercise with anybody who's applied to the cohorts or who has actively reached out to us. So in that example, Kira, you'd say like, okay, hey guys, I'm interested in doing robotics, vacuum cleaner, like RoboVac data. Awesome. We'd ask you to do a bit of research on what the schema is. So the schema is basically the structure of the data. And you can download the schema. You can usually access it via API through the provider of that data. And we would look at that schema and then we would present it to some of our networks. And so once we presented it to some of the networks and we say, yep, there's a there, we think that you might be able to commercialize this for X number, we present that back to the team and they say, we say, is it worthwhile for you to continue building this? And that's a really iterative process where sometimes I'll give you an example of a robotics one where they had a certain approach in relation to robotics data. And through market validation, we help them actually refine that schema and change their approach slightly to make that data more commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Or certain information, like the credit card data DAO Credmont, we got feedback that having additional demographic information about each user was actually going to multiply the value of the data set. So we'll offer those insights to the teams so that you can build these legitimate revenue generating businesses on Vana. And then we'll also help you to make sure that the demand is met. So we'll broker some of those transactions. Now, obviously, that's not scalable. And I'll say that like the long-term vision is for these data sets and these data tokens to just be listed in a stock exchange, New York Stock Exchange like thing where you can actually just buy, sell, and trade data sets. But in the meantime, this is currently where the data market is at. The majority of these deals do currently occur behind closed doors in private
Mm-hmm.
transactions. And so we're just kind of meeting the market where it's at to ensure that the ecosystem companies are able to be revenue generating and financially sustainable from day one.
So have you got some DAOs, unions, data pool collectives already on Vana that are generating revenue? Are you able to give a few examples of some successful DAOs?
Yeah, a couple of them. So the Spotify Data DAO launched, I think, about a month ago now, with 10,000 users that were that pre-registered for the data collective. They're now sitting at about 17,000 users, and they aggregate
Wow.
people's Spotify data. And it's really cool because those guys entered into a pretty early transaction. Actually, we were helping facilitate this deal prior to their token launch event. So sometimes this will kind of occur in the background. But by the time they did their token launch, within 2 weeks, they were able to enter into a data sale with Solo AI to allow that data set to be used to train AI generated music algorithms. So that's one example there. And that kind of relates to some projects that we've had in the past with some some global 500 companies that wanted to use this kind of data for trend forecasting. And so they're continuing to investigate trend forecasting use cases for their data. Another example is we've got an open collaboration right now with Flower AI to build a user-owned foundation model for foundational LLM, and Diffusion, which is the Telegram data DAO, and the GPT data DAO
Mm-hmm.
have contributed their data sets to create this user-owned foundation model. And the structure of that's slightly different, where they will then get a share of the model itself. And that's a really interesting business model, which I kind of want to offer here of sometimes people who want to develop AI may not be capital rich, and that's okay. There are instances in which they say, hey guys, can we partner with your data DAO so that you can get some financial upside in whatever we produce? And that's kind of this beautiful thing of like the who gets the, it would be as if like each of us got a little share every time somebody chatted to ChatGPT because our data's in it.
Mm.
Like there's a future world in which all AI tools, like we get some sort of royalties flowing back to us if our data is in it. And we're kind of laying the foundation for that on Vana through these commercialization arrangements as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. If you think about, you're literally collecting a massive pool of real human data, not public data that's been scraped off the internet. And then this data is going to be used to train highly specific models. So if you can actually think about that, the model is only as good as the data coming in. So you're actually going to be able to, if you look further on down your roadmap or other partnerships that you can create, it's actually, you've got the key ingredient is the data, which is actually more valuable than the models, because the data is what makes the model so valuable. So you're able to reverse engineer. Once you've collected all of the data points, you're able to then to go, okay, what data sets can we combine, create a hyper specific model for that, and then commercialize that model, which will then like create the flywheel to, I guess, the whole entire commercialization aspect of it, right?
Yeah, it's also the distribution of that value, because right now, if you think about the distribution of value of some of the closed source large language models, it kind of stops at that centralized company. So like,
Mm-hmm.
every I pay for ChatGPT Premium, so that's like what, like $200 a month, something crazy. And so like, who does that flow to? That flows directly into a private company and maybe the company's investors, but that's where it stops. Is that where the value has been created to create that product? I would argue no, because the value that's been created has been created in the data that's gone in to improve that model. And so there's this kind of really warped flow where the people who've actually contributed to the value creation are not part of the economic transaction at the end of that pipeline. And what we reimagine is a world in which, no, 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 if you're going to use an AI model and you've contributed something valuable to it, whether you're an engineer, you're a marketer, you're a data provider, whatever you are, that value is representatively distributed to all the people who've actually added the value. Um,
Mm.
and that's like the opposite of value extraction. And that's what we really want to encourage at Vana.
Are you also able to attach different values to the data? Because, say, if you're just like a very, I don't know, type O blood person, you're very common.
Yep.
Maybe if you're like a type A, negative, minus, positive, or very rare blood specific type, your data is probably going to be more valuable to the whole entire data set. Are you able to sort of separate that within a data pool?
Yeah, so interestingly, this is a common problem that we had in data collections, because oftentimes we would get these things called interlocking quotas. So that's a technical term for like, in a data set, if you want a representative sample, you want certain age brackets, you may want certain race brackets, you might want certain country
Mm.
brackets. And these quotas kind of intersect. So you need a minimum number in each of those categories in order to create the signal. Now, in Web 2 world, it's really hard to change the different compensation for different people. Like there's a lot of levers that you need to pull, and you can do it, but it's quite manual. In Web 3 world, you can think about, based on how you assess the data, whether or not somebody should be worth more or less in that data set, given their value to the overall signal. In its purest form, there are these things called model influence functions. We're collaborating with a university researcher on these right now, which is basically, it assesses the degree to which your individual data point changes the data set. And in its purest form, you can
Mm.
think about these model influence functions determining your rewards as you contribute to the data set. Um, so, like, if, for instance, I uploaded my data and then I try to upload my data again, theoretically, the model influence function should return 0 because I haven't really added anything more to the data set than I
Mm.
previously had. So, not currently scalable, but this is really cool technology. One of our data collectors is actually working on making this scalable. And once we do, that's going to be hugely game changing. Um, and that's just kind of like an example of where you can offer differential rewards for different levels of contribution to
Mm.
the data set, which can happen programmatically in Web3 in a fair and very transparent way. And so that's kind of also one of the benefits of bringing this all on chain, not just the confidential aggregation piece of it, but also the ability to offer dynamic rewards.
Hmm. For sure. So, to dive further into that, people who are contributing rare or unique data sets can have a higher weighting to the overall pool because it's an outlier, right?
Yep.
But when you think about, okay, there's the public data that's publicly available online. We've got our private data, which has come from my own resources. And then we've got this new thing called synthetic data, right? So where does synthetic data sit on this whole entire scale? Is it as valuable as personalized data? What are people doing with it? Or maybe even like to start with describing exactly what it is. Some people might not actually understand what synthetic data is. So
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
Yeah, so typically when someone thinks about synthetic data, it's data that's derived either from an existing data set or, derived using some sort of an LLM tool or something like that. Look, my perspective on synthetic data is it amplifies an existing data set. So sometimes, in a very basic form, I actually started a lot of my data collections in LiDAR or image data collection or data annotation.
Okay.
And so oftentimes we would expand the data set by doing things like transformations. So we would label the data set and then we'd flip it and we'd flip it upside down. And so then you have 4 permutations of the one data. Now, theoretically, those 3 different permutations outside of the original, they're synthetic because that's not the actual data. That's its very crude form. More recently, you can actually synthesize the data using AI, right? So you can create some noise and generate synthetic data. Current research is that it is helpful, like it does add value and weight. But if you've got this missing chunk, so say, I don't know if you saw, I think back in 2010 when Google did its Google Images started to automatically label people's faces. Did you see the controversy around that?
No, I missed that.
Okay, so basically what happened was Google created this face recognition model, an object recognition model, and it identified people's faces and said, this is your friends, these are animals, etc. But for people with darker skin tone, it actually labeled them all as gorillas, which was horrific. And they had to wind back. And you can just search it. Just search like Google gorilla controversy. You'll see it. And the reason why is because it didn't have. So what the data set was probably presented with was pictures of humans labeled as humans, pictures of gorillas labeled as gorillas, but no pictures of humans of color. And so when the AI model was shown a human of color, it had reasoned that the closest thing that it knew to that was a gorilla and not a human. And so it labeled them all as gorillas. It was one of the worst DEI controversies in AI history. Very famous. Would synthetic data help with that? My answer is probably not, because the data set itself was lacking that group of people. It didn't have people of color. And so if they tried to synthesize more data, the model would have just been more biased towards classifying white people as people and brown people as gorillas. So that's just an example of where synthetic data can often not help because the data doesn't actually exist in the original data set to synthesize more data, and it just entrenches the bias in the data set.
Yeah, it's just enriching what's already there, but it's not adding any new value. And that's what you're saying is by allowing individuals, which is the whole world, have the opportunity to contribute, it creates the largest, most diverse data set available.
Yes.
And it's also very unique data because it's probably for the first time that data has been taken away from one of the tech giants and into more of a union, public or usable sort of ecosystem. So yeah, it's really interesting.
There's a couple of other examples here, like just briefly on that. Like if you were early in some of the AI generated image stuff, they used a fundamental data set called the Lion dataset, LAION, to train the diffusion models that created, those AI portraits and stuff like that. That was based on this. That data set is really strong. It's well labeled pictures. But I think Bloomberg published this piece. If you searched in that data set like CEO, it would only come up with white men. And if you search in that data set like domestic helper, it would only come up with women of color. And so because the data wasn't there of those people labeled in different roles, they didn't have any black CEOs, they didn't have any female CEOs in the data set, or very few. They didn't have any white males who were doing domestic work. The world that the AI model knew, and it's no fault of anyone, it's just the data, the world that the AI model knew didn't include those possibilities. So what you're 100% there, right, Kira? With this additional subtle data, you're adding possibilities for the AI model to learn about the subtleties of human nature. That's why I think it's an infinite problem, because we have infinite permutations of who we are and how society exists. And the more there is almost infinite data that you can put into a model to get it to understand that.
Yeah, I want to dive deeper a little bit on that. I mean, if you think about the world and if I could have a heat map of the world and there's all the different LLMs or, ChatGPT, Grok, and that'd be really interesting to see which part of the world is using what different language models.
Yep.
And then I'm sure, say, for example, Grok was all hot in America and ChatGPT is all hot in Europe and something. And it'd be really interesting to see how these models bias is trained because of what the users are talking to them about. Because I can imagine that the requests or tasks that people are asking in Europe are different from Latin America to Africa, and it would kind of create just geographic bias within these different models, just because that's the data that they're receiving.
Yep.
So yeah, I never really thought about that, but I think it'd be interesting to see how AI models can remain global and unbiased with the data that they're getting from. But I think that's something that you guys are heading down that route, right?
Yeah, I think that this is the problem of AI tools that are not built on user-owned data. It all comes down to data, in that you start to create these negatively reinforcing effects that amplify usage and data. So if everybody is speaking to ChatGPT in a way that's vulgar and awful, and ChatGPT is using that data to retrain ChatGPT, then what's going to come out of ChatGPT is going to be vulgar and awful responses, right? It's just the nature of reinforcement learning. You are reinforcing the model to do certain things. And actually, on this point, I asked a bunch of friends in AI last week. I said, how many of you have gotten cranky at ChatGPT in the last 2 weeks? And everyone put their hand up. Look, I'm so there. I've yelled at ChatGPT so much in the last month, and it encourages antisocial human behavior. But if you think about that, that means that it's reinforcing antisocial human behavior and passive responses in the way that we are, because it's gauging your engagement. And if you are engaging more based on how much you abuse ChatGPT, what are you training the model to do? And how are we then training ourselves to interact with society? And there's a lot of emerging research on this right now around what are the effects, not on labor or not on the market, but what are the effects on the human psyche of overuse of LLMs in relation to how our brains are adapting to different conditions. And I mean, one fascinating piece of information there is that a lot of millennials and Gen Z use LLMs for productivity. A lot of Gen Alpha use LLMs for relationships. And what does that mean? And I posted in my Twitter today, I'm like, guys, if you're using ChatGPT as your therapist, you're trusting your mental health with Sam Altman. Let that sink in. Like, that is kind of crazy if we think about it. So you're speaking about this phenomenon of further entrenching biases based on our usage. But that's the problem when we're not even owning the data that we're using in the chat models. They're owning that data and using it to train models. We don't have the right. Well, we do have the right, but we're not taught the ability to take that data and use it for ourselves. And that's the biggest problem in terms of how AI is currently developing. There's the cost of switching at AI LLMs is just too high, and people are just going to further entrench biases in their favorite LLMs, and that's an antitrust issue, an ethics issue, and a human health issue, I think.
I think we're starting to already see that everyone's got. I mean, ChatGPT has the first mover advantage for sure. Even my friends who I study engineering school with, I was speaking to my friend the other day, and he said to me, "Oh, Kira, like, what's Gemini? What's Claude? What should I be doing? Perplexity. There's so many out there. Like, aren't they all the same?" I'm like, "No, they're actually not. They've all got their own little things, but." A lot of people just use ChatGPT because it's got all of your history, all of your data, right? And that's what makes it handy.
Yeah.
So I know there's a thing at the moment is like the data races, right? And very famously, Meta just purchased 49% of Scale AI for $14.3 billion.
Yes.
And that is showing how much commercial opportunity is there in data. If one of the big techs are leaning into the skid heavily.
Yeah.
And so essentially they're one of your competitors. So how does Vana position yourself amongst these tech giants and forge the way of decentralized data ownership?
Yeah, I think that that's really the data demand side of the problem. I would say there's a couple of actually tailwinds in relation to that acquisition. Scale AI currently holds a lot of contracts with some of the big tech giants, but now that it's been acquired by Meta, or effectively acquired by Meta, uh, there's competition that would prevent, say, a Google, or might prevent a Google or an Apple from continuing that contract. So I actually
Mm,
anticipate there being a lot of churn in some of the larger contracts in the data space because of the close associations with Scale AI and Meta now. The other thing that's really interesting is it's put questions around whether Scale AI will ever go public. It's still a private company, and
mm,
people have thought about it as being very investable as a public company because of the data arms race. And now that's drawn to question whether or not there's going to be any public exposure. And we're seeing an increasing trend in AI to keep companies large and private versus keeping them open and public.
mm,
And so I see that as being actually really good to contrast that ethos with the ethos at Vana, which is we're a decentralized network that's tokenized. So then anybody who wants to own a slice of the infrastructure that allows people to own their data can participate in the ecosystem, and be partial owners of the growth of this fantastic ecosystem. So I actually think it does it almost shines a light on a different ethos and a different approach to this data problem, where for us it's all about community and user ownership,
mm-hmm.
not just at the data level, but at the infrastructure level as well. And that's so important to me and my co-founder, because we think the data is too valuable for even the rails of that data to be owned in any individual or company's hands. Now, in terms of like the sales cycle itself, like we're making certain plays to ensure that Vana is well positioned to be able to perhaps win some of those contracts or bid for some of those contracts. And that's always been our ethos as well. Like we survive because we generate value in a real way to the world that needs the thing that we're producing. And so it would be remiss of us not to position ourselves for potential churn of these large contracts as a protocol.
Yeah, do you think there's opportunity once there's going to be a tipping point where, for example, okay, let's think big things like, but if you manage to get 51% of Facebook users to give you guys or give Ivana a DAO, a pool, a union,
Yeah.
their data, then you actually have more control over the Facebook data than Facebook because you've got 51% of all Facebook users contributing data and earning from their data.
Yeah.
How does that sit with these big tech giants? I think you guys might have had a little bit of a run in with Reddit already, right?
we have. We have. We'll talk about that. Yes. So it's there's a couple of points here. First of all, we may not even need 51% because you can sometimes get signal from less data than exists on the platform. So if the use case is to try to fine tune a model or to create a more advanced model with the data, you may not need 51% of the platform data. You know, it's not a kind of a democratic vote rule. You may only need X thousand number of data points in order to get enough
Mm,
value from the signal. So that's kind of like the first piece here. The second piece is Vana is built on this idea of self-sovereign user-owned data, and it wouldn't work if not for the fact that users maintain rights to their data. Whether you live in a country that has GDPR or not, there are various regulations in approximately 90% of jurisdictions in the world that allow you to access your data. You have a legal right to take that data away that you create. There's nothing that platforms can do once you do that, because that
mm,
data is yours. It would be both illegal and a PR risk for them to go after people for taking their data and, you know, doing something with it. And this was essentially, this kind of leads to what happened. There was a community of Redditors that created a subreddit when Reddit decided to sell its data to Google for, I think, $250 million. They were outraged because if you think about Redditors, like I'm not an active one, but my friends are, and they're like, we don't post here so that people can make money off our data. We post here because we want to help other everyday people to,
mm.
navigate life. Like this is crazy. And so the Reddit Data DAO was born out of this subreddit. And they came to us and like, how do we do it? And we kind of experimented with them. And so they aggregated, I think within 1 week, they had 140,000 people come and try to contribute their data. They went through the validation process and they actually filtered out some of, there's always going to be spam and bots. So they got up to like, I think 22,000 people who contributed, legitimate people contributing their data in a week. That's unheard of in the
That's
world of data.
awesome.
That would have taken us 6 months to do. So this is when we knew we were onto something big. And we knew we were onto something big because Reddit then sent a letter to us basically saying like, hey, you can't do this. And we were like, Vana's a protocol. We put the rails up so that people can commercially aggregate this. If you want to go after the Reddit users, you're more than welcome to. And obviously Reddit's not going to go and start suing all of its users for taking their own data when they're already inflamed. And so what actually happened was they changed their policies and said, hey guys, like, we're really sorry. We're going to allow academic access for research purposes to Reddit data, but also still do the data sale. So like incremental movement. So this is more than just about like the data itself. This is a societal shift. And we're really proud of that data DAO for being able to really kind of leverage that and say like, you can try to sue us, but I'm sorry, but that's going to be very bad for you. And I guess their folks were just like, no, this is like a happy enough compromise. Let's kind of sweep this under the rug and let them do their own thing. And the Reddit community then used that data to train a model. They're currently doing they're involved in the Collective One experiment. So, they're now taking control over their data in a really positive way. So I don't know whether we like the protocol itself doesn't position ourselves in juxtaposition with large tech. We almost would like to see ourselves as like an alternative optional route for highlighting a really key structural problem in the economy of data. And if, we are neutral infrastructure in this space.
Absolutely. And I think that's a first movement, and you're going to see, I think, a few more of these evolve as people understand how they can use that as an example or as like, a Trojan horse, and then be like, oh, okay, like, and how you can create your own little data or unique little data set, whether it's for newborn mums or it's for, environmental social impact people or whatever you want. Data is key for making informed decisions, and if you can figure out a way to collect it, whether it's like you said within your own little small community, you only might need 1,000 data points to create a sample, and then that can start a lot of different things as well. So I want to ask for you, I mean, a while ago we were on a meeting and you just showed me that you had downloaded your Instagram data, I think it was. What was the most surprising thing that you discovered when you first retrieved your data from one of your social accounts? What surprised you the most?
So people think about social media data as the stuff that's public and scrapable. And I think that that's kind of one of these misnomers. When people think about personal data on Vana, they think, oh, can't you just scrape it? It's like, you can scrape some of it for sure. There are certain things that platforms capture about you and analyze about you that are not publicly shown on your profile. So like,
that's what I want to know. What was the secret sauce?
So they give you a classification, like a set of descriptive words that describe how you interact with ad content, and they use those words to target ads to you. So I can't even remember what mine was, but a friend of mine had stressed but not depressed. And like, I'm like, wait a minute, you're making like a psychological diagnosis on someone based on their interactions. Like there's some serious responsibility that attaches to that. But things like that, where they're able to see your ad clicks, how long you were on a particular post, any likes you've made, any private messages. And through that, they're able to create these aggregate analytics that are also part of your personal information that you can see when you download. The other thing that was kind of surprising to me was they don't just track the websites you visit while you're on Instagram. They use pixels to track websites that you visit when you're not on Instagram but logged in on your phone. So like this is a fully comprehensive overview of who I am as a person. And that's just sitting there for somebody else to use to train AI. And that could be very valuable to me. Like if I was somebody who was clinically depressed, that could be a life-saving diagnosis that Instagram could offer to me to help me seek medical attention. But instead they use it to target ads to me. Crazy.
Yeah. And they sometimes say that your Instagram feed or whatever social feed that you're using, they say that it knows you better than you know yourself. Like, you're talking about something, you're thinking about something, and then all of a sudden you're starting to see it and it's reinforcing those messages. So it's like you actually got a humongous digital footprint that people are doing like psychology testing and psychoanalysis of to turn me into a product. So then it's like all through advertising and marketing that way. But you're actually wanting to bring it back around to how do you help yourself with your data,
Yes.
whether it's mental health or financial decisions or whatever it might be. Your data is like your digital footprint, the digital aspect to your life. And I mean, yeah, if you have more data about yourself, you can make informed decisions about yourself. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, look, I think that the piece there is like even just having fun with your data. Like, it doesn't need to always be scary, but there are a couple of I'll share a little bit of alpha. There's a couple of apps being built on Vana, one which allows you to put in your Uber Eats data and get a workout that allows you to burn all the calories that you've got Uber Eats. Something fun like that where you're like, I didn't realize that all of my Uber Eats is actually causing me to bring up, put on all of this weight. It's like, yeah, there are some cool, fun things. As you said, it's your footprint, it's who you are. It's not just junk. It represents something that's very unique about you and something that's very valuable.
For sure. All right, let's bring it back around to you as a founder. And I know that you've been juggling a lot of hats. Vana has been going for now about 4 years. So that's a
Yeah.
long time in the founder's driving wheel.
Yeah.
And what are some messages, some lessons that you've learned to keep yourself inspired, keep yourself going and not getting this burner run out? What is it? What do you
Burnout.
call it? Burnout. Yeah, I lost my
Um,
mind for a minute.
Look, I mean, one of our mentors, he mentioned last week, he's like, but founders need to always be at the edge of burnout, like test the edge of where they're at. And I think one of the things that I've learned, especially this year after TGE, because it doesn't end after TGE. Like honestly, founders who take a chill pill after TGE, like what the hell are you doing? Like this is the
No,
start.
TG is when it starts.
Exactly. So like post TGE, you've really got to ride the edge and see where that edge is for you. And I think, especially for founders who feel like they're at the edge of burnout or like are worried about that, my recommendation is test the edge. And like my co-founder is incredibly supportive. We're so supportive of each other in the way that gives us the freedom and safety to test that edge. Because I know if I have a mental breakdown or something like that, she's there to help me. And similarly, she can test her edge because she knows I'm there to catch her. We've got a fantastic team that'll also catch us as well. So having the freedom, constructing the support network around you to test your edge around burnout is actually the most important thing that you can do as a founder. Because if you're scared of that edge, or if you're unaware of that edge, you run the risk of jumping too far and having incredibly awful consequences for your project and for yourself, or leaving that edge too far away. I've seen so many people who are either post burnout or who are just scared of that edge, and they're crippled. They're like, I'll be kind of useless because I want to work a 9 till 6 and not sign on anymore. It's like that's not the way the founder world works. You have to constantly be at the edge, and you've got to constantly check where that edge is for you and constantly change it. It constantly changes. So that's my biggest advice for anybody who wants this role. Get to know your edge. I do a lot of I do like inversions and handstands a lot, and it's all about like testing where your edge is. So like I would say like practice it in your everyday as well. Like you really do need to test your edge, and people who like that are going to be great founders.
Have you got one of those inversion tables where you lie upside down for a while? Is that what you've got?
No. I actually do handstand classes. So
Oh
I
my God,
practice,
impressive.
I practice my inversions. Like we just did a founder on site, and a lot of like wrist and shoulder strengthening things. Crow pose, getting upside down, that kind of stuff. And I think it's really cool because it gives you a different perspective, and it's a little bit of fun. It reminds me of when I was a kid. When you're a kid, you can do a handstand. Now you're an adult, you're like, I feel so uncoordinated.
Yeah, my legs would be all over the shop. I remember I used to love doing handstands in the swimming pool because they made it so much easier.
Yeah. Now it's like hard, but it's something that I practice. Because again, I like to find my edge. Like I like to see how long I can do things like that for, and very, very important skill.
Speaking of finding your edge, I think this is a interesting story that you kind of shared with me a little bit. So you went on a founders retreat or just a mental health getaway, escape, and you decided to take yourself to Phuket, the beautiful Phuket. I'm also here actually in Thailand at the moment, absolute stunning country. and you thought you're going to go for a nice, retrieve, reset, and tell me what happened. You found yourself in a whole different predicament.
Yeah, so this is a tip for all of those folks. If you're going to book accommodation, read the fine print, because I thought I was going to an all-inclusive resort, and it was a resort, and it was all-inclusive, but it was a fasting resort. So there was no food, and I was booked in for a week. And look, like they pick you up at the airport and they take you to the resort, so you don't even know where to find food. If I had money, so I could go out and buy it, but I really didn't know where I was, and I really didn't have any. There weren't any visible stores, so there's nothing you can really do. It was a really interesting exercise in just being like, well, I could be frustrated right now, or I could just accept the reality that I'm in and enjoy the experience. And it was like, I think on day 2, all I could think of was KFC chicken, and it was it gave me a little bit of empathy. I wouldn't say it gave me. I'd say it'd be kind of insensitive to say that it gave me an understanding of what it's like to be hungry. But I think for a lot of folks in the world, all they can think of is food, because they don't have enough calories, and their human body goes into that mind of like, I need calories, I need food. And so for a couple of days there, I was just in that kind of lizard brain. But then you kind of almost, something happens, and then you stop thinking about it, and you reach a point of mental clarity. And so that's just an example of where I'm like, well, yeah, I could have been really upset about it. I could have jumped up and down and tried to find a way out, or I just kind of was just like, let's just chill and see what this is like. And I was, a brand new experience for me, and it really made me, think about like what the edge of hunger looks like for me.
Interesting. Did you find any sort of mental clarity? I know that some
Oh,
of the
yeah.
benefits of fasting, like once you sort of get over that initial emotional and psychological, like I'm starving, I'm running out of food, your body actually can live for a week without food. And I'm sure you're having different like waters or supplements or something like that along the road. But it's I've done a week-long fast also, like previously myself, not at a founders retreat in Phuket, but just out of self-experiment.
Yeah.
I wanted to try it. And I was very much a similar situation to you. Like first 2 days, it was sort of consciously on your mind, and then that sort of subsides. And I found like a new sharpness, mental clarity, focus. I mean, I was just like experimenting. I like to try different things like that. But I found it as a unique experience. I wouldn't be doing it, every week or every or quite so frequently. But did you find that like you came out of there with new clarity, kind of ready to go again?
100%. I think for me, it was beautiful. Like there were some certain health benefits associated with it as well. Like I was feeling much better in my digestion, because you introduce food gradually, but also very mindfully. And I think that, especially if you're, and I would do it in a heartbeat if I had more time, honestly, like just running Vana is just taking up a lot of my time. But I think at the next opportunity, I would try to do that again, because it almost hits reset on your body and your mind. I believe in the body mind connection a lot, and I think if you are emptying yourself in your body and allowing yourself to cleanse, a lot of cleansing also happens in mind. There was no tech at this retreat either, so I was able to kind of fully detach, and I think that that's something that we very rarely do. So highly recommend it for folks. Obviously check with your doctor. I'm not a doctor, like don't go ahead and do it, but for me it just got me to that level of personal clarity that I needed at the time, and I look forward to doing it again.
That's exciting. Very cool. Well, I want to wrap this up now. We've been going for an hour, but if you had a message to, sorry, my like headphone has been like playing up this whole entire thing. It keeps coming out. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, another question that I do love asking all my guests on here is, if you can cast yourself back to your 17-year-old self, you might have been just coming out of high school. What messages are you going to be telling your younger self?
Oh, so many.
The ones that you can publicly share anyway.
I'm just trying to think about the most impactful messages that I can share with myself. This is going to sound pretty controversial. Take a gap year.
Oh, I love it. But I think in New Zealand and Australia, the gap year is very ingrained in our culture.
Yeah.
And it's a thing that many people, but usually the gap year comes after university in New Zealand. I know maybe similar in Australia, But
Getting to that.
yeah, I also agree. A gap year can do a lot of wonders. So why would you recommend everybody take a gap year?
Well, I'd recommend that for me because, I was
Hmm.
pretty sheltered when I was younger. Like, standard school captain of my high school, kind of, person who was always doing the right thing, smart kid, really good at music, all of this kind of stuff. And, um, I was good at sports, music, and I was like just good at stuff. And that kind of leads you down a pathway of wanting to continue to excel in areas that you may not be passionate about. And I would have wasted a
Mm,
lot less time if I stopped trying to please what I thought was the world around me and just did things by myself. I don't think I gave myself enough time to discover who I was when I was 17. And so, like, I think that's what I would tell myself. Just go out and explore. Like,
mm.
you have the rest of your life to work. You have the rest of your life to really stress out about things. And I don't know if you look back on yourself at 17, Kira, you're like, I'm kind of jelly of where I was because, like, you could kind of gallivant around the world and do things without the responsibilities you have as an adult. Um, so I would say, like, I don't have regrets about it. Like, I am one of those people who thinks that, every single thing that I've experienced has gotten me to today in this conversation. But I also think, like, it would have led me down a different and probably equally enriching path if I had taken that year off.
Mm. Well, I think you've found yourself in the perfect little nest to take the world by storm and tackle on these massive tech giants. So, if anybody is listening or watching along today, where can they follow along to you and also Vana, or maybe spin up their own data DAO?
Yeah, so DataDAO is docs.vana.org. Take a look at that. Vana.org is our website. If you want to follow us on Twitter, so it's at Vana. If you want to follow me, it's at ArtyArt88. And we are also present on TikTok and Instagram. Look for Vana HQ on those platforms. But yeah, that's it.
Cool. And also, if you guys are heading towards Korean Blockchain Week,
Yes.
make sure you go there. You're going to give a little shill around your activation because I am so for it.
Okay, so we do have an IRL activation. We're all about experiential data here at Vana. I'm not going to share all details of it,
Okay.
but when the details get announced, make sure you're early because there are going to be some cute little giveaways. It
Mhm.
is a sweet activation with cute little giveaways. That's all I'll say for now, and I will wait to release the info about it later on.
What a fantastic tease to end on. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Art. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Kira. Thank you very much,
All right.
guys. Bye.
Bye.